Linux can be a lifesaver for many old devices that are not Windows 11 compatible. It doesn't require a certain TPM chip or processor generation to run. It is less resource hungry in both storage and memory demands, often outperforms Windows in certain tasks, and it's much more customizable and privacy oriented. But while Linux can save many old devices from being thrown out to the junkyard, when it comes to buying a Linux compatible device, it can become difficult due to driver incompatibilities. In this video, we are going to talk about some of the things that you should look out for when shopping for a device that has good Linux compatibility, what you can do to verify that it is working, and ultimately, where you should generally consider the tips that I'm going to give you in this video. Let's get into it. This video was made possible by channel members of our community. If you want to participate in selecting new video topics, see what's going on behind the scenes, and gain access to various tips and tricks, then please make sure to check out the join button or the link in the video description down below. I believe the first thing that we should start off with before we go into all of the mobile devices are Wi-Fi components. Many desktop PCs come with Wi-Fi out of the box, and the newer the device, the more difficult it can get. There are countless of blog posts, videos, or even tutorials on how to get Wi-Fi working on Linux, and even then it's not always perfect. It should be just like with my system. You install Linux and it just works, but that is not always the case. So if you are buying a new desktop PC, what are the things that you should look out for? There are 3 Wi-Fi chipsets that will generally perform really good on Linux. The best ones are Intel and Qualcomm, followed by the improving MediaTek drivers, even though they are not perfect yet. Alright, let's try shopping for them. For this example, we're going to start off on the website PC Part Picker to find a new motherboard. Let's say I go for this Prime B550MA from Asus. With the exact model number, I can look up the motherboard on the official Asus homepage and check if they list the Wi-Fi chipset vendor. Okay, it's Realtek, which doesn't have the best support. Now, we could check if someone has made experiences with that motherboard in particular, but you usually just want to move on until you find one that uses a well-supported Wi-Fi chipset vendor. However, again, try to double check it first and then decide if it's worth going for it. And for fully built desktop PCs, you'll do the same. One thing that I want you to remind of is that if you have an existing PC that is also a couple of years old, then you don't really need to go through this process. The easiest way to find out if all of your stuff is working is to just load an installer file onto a USB stick and try it out with the live ISO it contains. If Wi-Fi, LAN and Bluetooth work there, then good. Generally a good idea to first test it with the live ISO before actually installing it. Anyway, so that's Wi-Fi and LAN, and you can do the same for Bluetooth as well. Let's talk about modular devices. You know, mice, keyboards, audio interfaces and all that stuff. On Windows, you often need to download some app to get the full experience out of it. Or worse, even install a custom driver for it to work at all. And yeah, many of those devices are just not Linux compatible because of that. However, many are. If you're buying a new gaming mouse, then the best brands are usually Logitech because of the many models that are supported by Piper, and Razer because of OpenRazer. If you want a different mouse, let's say the Model O from Glorious or a mouse from Asus, then you want to check the GitHub repository of libratbag, the foundation of Piper, to see if it's listed there. If it isn't and you also can't find an alternative program, then this is also not the end. In that case, you want to check if the mouse has an onboard storage. If it does, you can, for example, configure it once on a Windows system or via a virtual machine, save the config to the mouse itself and just use it like that. The only caveat is of course that it doesn't support dynamic profiles, like for example a different profile per game. And for keyboards you do the same. The RGB configuration should be checked beforehand on the website of OpenRPG or a quick Google search. However, any fine-tuning, as in shortcuts, is not all that well supported if you go profile-based. When it comes to audio interfaces or even just headsets, then there are also some things to consider. For headsets, you should note that these virtual surround sound technologies are just not compatible with Linux out of the box, since they require an engine, usually developed by the big audio brands, which they're named after. But you can create something similar if you want. Applications like Easy Effect allow you to create custom audio profiles for your headset and even simulate surround sound a bit. It is not quite as advanced as the proprietary solutions, since those often integrate better with games and movies, but you can get really close, especially on the lower end of the price spectrum. If you are looking for true surround sound, as in full 5.1 or 7.1 setups, then Linux does actually support most surround sound technologies. You can enable the required standard via the application Pavu control. However, this does require the right hardware that supports the signal sent to them. Audio interfaces are a bit more challenging on Linux, especially if you don't want to buy the most expensive ones. The key detail that you want to look out for when shopping for an audio interface is that it is USB class compliant. Sometimes you need to look very carefully for any mention of this, because a USB connector does not automatically mean that it is class compliant. The Scarlett 2i2 from Focusrite, which is also the audio interface that I use personally, is USB class compliant, aka plug and play, or you can put it into a mode like that. Making sure that the audio interface is USB class compliant is incredibly important if you want a smooth experience on Linux. And generally, this is something that you want to look out for every USB device, also external cameras, webcams or capture cards. Another solution would be to buy a standalone device that can be controlled remotely. There are audio interfaces, for example, that can be controlled via a web browser, and they are essentially operating system independent, if they can also record on their own. Alright, so that was it for desktop PCs and some indicators about peripheral support. Let's talk about the elephant in the room and something that an increasing amount of users use instead of their desktop PC. Laptops, of course. Laptop support on Linux can be quite challenging. You run into more limitations, as you cannot just change a part like the motherboard for a better Wi-Fi chip. You have specialized hardware like a fingerprint reader or a webcam that supports scanning your face to unlock the operating system. You have a battery that needs to be taken care of, and for Windows, vendors often ship custom power profiles to improve battery life. In short, laptops are more difficult on Linux. However, that does not mean that there aren't any options. Let's start off with old laptops. Same old story. Boot a LifeISO, see if all the things you need work, and then you can go ahead and install it. When shopping for a new device, brands like Lenovo and Dell have increasingly started to shift their focus a bit more towards Linux, and even started to offer official support for it. Business or workstation-oriented laptops also often have public certifications and details about what works and what doesn't. If you don't want to do all of the research, however, then of course the easiest solution is just to buy a device from someone that specializes in Linux support. Tuxedo, System76, Slimbook, Purism or Framework to some extent. Laptops from these vendors work as advertised, don't have any incompatible hardware and usually work on many different distros, despite maybe featuring some custom drivers. They are often more expensive, but you get assurance. If you don't want to spend this money, then you can of course repeat the research process like I showed you for the desktop PCs. However, it might prove a bit more difficult since information about what is supported is not always 100% transparent, like my Surface Pro 7 Plus IPU6 camera for example. However, with all of the tips I have given you today, you should now be able to identify if a desktop PC or laptop is suited to work well on Linux. We have covered the most important aspects, which hardware vendors support Linux better than others, and how you can find the information required to make a decision. And who knows, maybe there are more devices out there than you thought possible. So, what do you think? Are there any important details that I missed when it comes to finding good hardware support for Linux? Which device are you using personally? I would be really interested to hear about it, so please make sure to let us know in the comment section down below. Before I end this video, I quickly wanted to mention that if you want to support the channel and make even better videos, then please feel free to check out our membership program as well as our online shop, whereas each sale helps to support various open source projects. If you've liked this video, then please make sure to show it with a like, and also don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on any future Linux videos just like this one. I really hope you had a blast watching and that I'll see you in the next video. However, till then, all that's left to say now is good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I'll see you around.